Good afternoon once again. I am willing to wager that most of you know my friend here. By a show of hands, I can't really see you all, how many of you know him? Oh, wow, that's fantastic. At the count of 3, please go ahead and say his name. Not yet. 1, 2, 3. Valorax, that's right. This is the environmentally conscious Lorax who speaks for the trees. He was the subject of a really coveted, wonderful book by Dr. Seuss, which was turned into a movie that starred Taylor Swift. Now, until a month ago, believe it or not, I did not know about this book. How is that possible? Well, I mostly grew up in the projects in Cleveland, Ohio. And I attended Tremont Elementary School. That's my school from grade 3 to 6. My home was not a home of books, believe it or not. And in fact, I did not have a television in our home until I was in my early teens. However, oddly enough, what we did have was a complete used set of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Now, that's a very dry book. I tried many times to read it. And how did we get this set? It was brought into our home by my father on one of his times visiting us. He was in and out of the Cleveland House of Corrections. Can you believe that name? I looked it up recently, and there are actually still House of Corrections, which is essentially the local jail. But while my father was not in my life on a daily basis, he was intermittently in my life. And he was an incredibly talented man. He was a wonderful singer. He would sing to us, and he was a fantastic storyteller. And his talents were not unlike the talent of my friends who also lived in the projects, whose fathers intermittently came in and out of their lives. And if you know anything about the housing projects back in the day, women, it was mostly single women. They may have been married, but they weren't allowed to, believe it or not, have those husbands and those fathers of children. But we still managed to enjoy having our fathers around when they did come around. So I did not grow up with the magic of the written word, except for school. I grew up in a rich culture of storytelling and song. That was what really boistered us in my project neighborhood. Now, my neighborhood was teeming with kids, many of whom were curious, fun, incredibly talented. But what we also, in this neighborhood, that most felt there probably wasn't a whole lot going on, but there really was, we also had other responsibilities. And in this picture, you'll see, not unlike what we see in some of our neighborhoods across the city here in New Haven. Taking care of younger siblings, playing, just not a worry in the world at all. It was wonderful where I grew up in my project play yard. Then something happened when I was 12. My mom and my older sister were in a terrible car accident. My mother was in the hospital a good 6 weeks, and unfortunately, due to complications from a head injury, she died. I sat in my room grieving. I mean, if anyone has ever lost a mother at any age, but certainly as you're going into adolescence, it's a true tragedy. And as I sat in my room, depressed, not really sure what was going to happen to my life, I did know for sure that my mother's death changed me for a lifetime, just took me on another path. And I was going to have to do something. I was going to have to take my life into my own hands. So in a new school, I was trying out for the basketball team, love sports. And I met a friend, a peer. She was 1 year older than I was. I was in the 8th grade. And we were trying out for basketball. She made the team, believe it or not, and I did not. And she said, Pat, I was called Pat or Patty at that time, I have a friend, a neighbor, and you should go to this school he is at. Well, that got my attention. That intrigued my imagination. So we exchanged addresses, and back in the day when there was snail mail, we became pen pals. And this friend described a place that seemed to be paradise. Every kid got to play basketball or sports. You could try out for figure drawing. You could be in the theater. You could be in the play. It just didn't matter. The resources were infinite, it seemed. And I was hooked. I said, I'm going to this school. I'm going to figure out what I need to get to this magical place. And so, as I think back to my 13-year-old self, I sent away for information about the school. I realized that this was a place that actually cost a lot of money, believe it or not. Never heard of such a thing. I only knew of schools that you just showed up, and then you were there, and you just started going to school. But not this school. I learned everything I could about this school. I learned that, yes, indeed, I would need money, something called a scholarship, and that this scholarship could fund me to attend this school, just like the friend of my friend. So I researched, realized that you had to take tests, all these things that you had to do. You had to take tests, you had to write essays, you had to do an interview. Never in my attending my public schools did I have to do that. But there was one hurdle that I was thinking, I'm going to put all of my eggs in this basket. So I have to have success. No ands, ifs, or buts about it. So I said, how can I make certain that I will get this scholarship? So I said, wait a minute. You know what? If I write these schools a year in advance, so when I was 13, I wrote the schools. I had 3. One was in New Hampshire, one was in Massachusetts, and the other one was in New York State. I, as you know, grew up and lived at the time in Cleveland. And I thought, if I write these schools and tell them, here's my dilemma. My mother died. I really want to help out my family. I sort of left out the fact that I really just wanted to play sports. I knew that I could make that basketball team there. And so I wrote them a year in advance of this scholarship application. And I said, know my name. My name is Patricia Melton. My application will be coming through, and I want you to know who I am because I am going to need this scholarship. In other words, there was a path forward. There was a path forward for me. There I am, all smiles. I did get into that school, and I got into two of the three. And I decided that, yes, I'm going to go. My family didn't know what was happening. They thought it was a fluke. But I knew what I wanted, which goes back to our children, our young children. They know what they want out of life, and they start to develop those dreams very young. And they need us, the community, to make sure that they can achieve their dreams and their hopes and their promise as a person and a human being. So I made it out, right? Great story. Happy ending. Not so fast. I'm smiling in that picture, and I'm happy. But behind that smile for many years was sadness and a disconnect. It wasn't long when I went home for my first Thanksgiving, and by the time I came home, my sisters and my friends teased me. They said, "You talk like a white girl." I was like, "What are you talking about?" I was using different words, like gross. That's not a word that you use in the Midwest, in Cleveland. I was using all sorts of different vocabulary that I was soaking in just in that 60 days. A door closed for me, and it closed to my friends and my family. In other words, I had to pay a very high price to realize that dream of education. I could have used a Lorax. For those who know the story, and now I do, that Lorax had very wise wisdom speaking for the trees, right? And I could have used a concept like that to protect me as I went on my journey, to protect my foundation, to protect my integrity, to protect my soul. In my travels over the years, I'm often told, "You're special, Patricia. You're different from those kids in the projects." I don't think I'm different. Because one of the things that I've come to understand is talent is equally distributed. I don't care if you live in Newhallville, if you live in East Rock, if you live in India. Talent is everywhere. What is not is the opportunity to develop that talent. And that's something that we in this community have addressed. So, do I feel special? No. I only felt special in that my mother died. It made me a little bit more desperate in my hopes and dreams, but really not different from any kid walking around this city. So, that's my personal story. It's not really different much. There are some kids in this city who have a little bit more, some who have a little bit less, but the common foundational fertilizing difference, the value add is our community. So when I came 10 years ago, I said, what does it look like when an entire community embraces its young people to college, through college, and brings that homegrown talent back? They never left, but takes that homegrown talent to help them to develop their talents in the city that they love, where they can seed and grow their roots right here as deep as they want, where people know their name, they know who they are, they've gone to school, they have a whole community that loves them and that follows them. We have a Promise program in this city, and that Promise program is sort of the boundary-spanning organization that connects all of those resources that can sometimes have leaky holes in them, sometimes. But Promise follows students from pre-K. Well, we're still following our alums, and they're turning out to be 28, starting families, buying homes, starting a business. Yes, we know who our lifeblood of this city is. Through a place-based economic intervention, a tuition benefit that 12 years ago, when announced, parents, mothers cried tears of joy. Why? Because they could see that path. They could have hope. They could see a way, as well as students. There was a program that was recently announced in Chicago, the Hope Scholarship. And it was to much hoopla, because to realize that American dream everywhere in this country is going to require more than high school. So this model is a model that, had it been in my community, I would be standing on a different stage in Cleveland, not here in New Haven. I'm glad to be here, absolutely. So from this tuition benefit, you have to live in the city, get a B average, and we expect our students to help themselves. This is not an entitlement. This is about students giving to their city, learning who the nonprofits are and the opportunities here. So we have a community service requirement that takes them beyond the narrowness of their project or their block or their home, so that they can learn how to navigate and engage these resources. And we want these resources to engage with our students. And for that, they do what they're supposed to do. Parents making sure that their students make it to school, because you can't learn unless you're there. We keep it very simple. The messaging is simple. The dreams are big, but the model is simple. After 12 years, we are making a huge impact. We see lots of development going on with our folks here in the city, multi-million-dollar, very expensive apartments going up. But when that development happens in an urban city, it usually happens around Main Street, give or take a couple of miles. But the neighborhoods where there's the lifeblood of the city, not so much. But with this program, as you see, the darker means there are millions. Fairhaven, millions and millions that are going directly into the development of our students in terms of their education at the college level. To date, $25 million and $5 million a year. And what does it do? It's just deepening that color. These kids are coming out with very little debt, little to no debt. That's almost unheard of. We've gone from a city that was down in the ranks of our urban peers to being the leader in college attendance of our peer cities in the state of Connecticut. But we're not satisfied with that. We want more. We want a lot more. New Haven Public Schools had decreased enrollment for a good amount of time. When Promise was announced, again, the message is so simple. It's hope, but it's hope with some teeth in it. It's not just a pipe dream, it's real. New Haven Public Schools went from graduation in the mid-50s, 55, 56%, to well over 80% in a little under 10 years. Now, we can't take credit for that, but what we can take credit for is that our leaders came together with nonprofits, with the city, with a world-class university, with just people who care about their young people, who embrace them. And from that, not only are parents choosing us, they're choosing New Haven, they're choosing to stay here, but students, a district that is over 80% BIPOC, those students are staying in school. And we, once again, among our peer district, have the highest graduation rate for Black and brown kids. The last thing that I want to say is that return on investment. We did this infographic a number of years ago, and we want to know, well, really, what is the impact? What will the impact? What could we envision the impact doing? This was like in 2014. And as you see, we projected that we would have 700 graduates. We thought, oh, that seems like a lot. We weren't really sure. But guess what? We have surpassed that, absolutely. In that, by 2020, we definitely had 700 graduates. And as we thought out, projected out over a lifetime, what kind of impact will these young people have? Well, just this little sliver over the lifetime of their earnings will contribute $1.6 billion to this city. And that's not the Yale endowment, people. That's our capital endowment that's in our young people. So, what does it take? What does it look like when a city embraces its young people to and through college and brings them back and follows them and helps them? And it's not cheers, but everybody does know your name here. It means that homegrown talent is a new model that needs to be embraced. Our young people are not leaving the state, so if I hear that one more time, where all the young kids are leaving the state, no, they're not. Our kids are here. From our most recent alumni survey, 85% of them they're here. They want to stay here. They don't want to go to Boston. They don't want to go to New York. Those are all great and beautiful cities, but we have a nice, beautiful city here. And that lifeblood, which are our scholars, cultivating that talent, that's the right thing to do. I come back, see those beautiful faces? and there are a lot of them. I come back to our wise friend, the Lorax. His wisdom and Dr. Seuss's was spot on. Unless someone like you cares a lot, nothing is ever going to get better. It's not. Continue to harvest our homegrown talent. Thank you.